Hey, Pastor, we gotta talk.
Really? What's going on?
Well, we're trying to get content for Easter, and we really want to know what's the theme about. Can we talk right here? Is that possible? Or?
Why don't we go to the studio?
Let's
Is that
go.
okay?
Sounds good.
All right, let's go.
So, Pastor Clark, now that we're finally here, the Easter theme is about exposing the cross, right? And
Yeah,
so
that's right.
I'm just curious, what exactly does that mean, and what are we hoping to, happen to the people when they come and they experience this theme in person?
Well, basically, when you think about Easter, and I was thinking about the cross this year, and we've been talking about unfiltered. Mm-hmm. Most people focus upon Easter for Easter Sunday. And Easter Friday and Saturday is almost like a warm-up to Easter Sunday. Mm. Easter Sunday is like the Super Bowl, right? It's like the big thing that we've been waiting for, from melancholy to triumph. But I actually think that the high point is not necessarily the resurrection, but the crucifixion.
Okay.
So what I'm trying to capture is, and this is what I love about the apostle, or the Gospel of John. Because when you read the Synoptic Gospels, they talk about the crucifixion, the burial, but it's almost rushing towards a resurrection in the narrative as a high point.
Right.
As they run to the empty tomb and all that happened, people get there and then Jesus is alive. But John's Gospel, the high point is not necessarily the resurrection, it's the crucifixion. Because it's on the cross that Jesus cries, "Tedaisai, it is finished." So John lingers at the cross more, and so his theology is more cruciformed.
Oh, all right.
And also, when you think about his life of suffering, and so this year I just want to kind of focus upon slowing down the process and contemplating the significance of the cross, because I think only by knowing the significance, the depth of the cross, what happened on the cross with Christ, with God, with the Trinity, only by kind of contemplating and lingering there a little bit longer than we do, can we really understand the power of the resurrection.
Oh, wow, okay. So that makes a lot of sense, actually, because it does seem like a lot of the time the focus is, okay, the empty tomb, right? And so for us to focus on that cross, we get to pause and, like you said, understand its significance a lot more. So I really like that. So when we're talking about, highlighting the cross and exposing the cross, it seems like there's something deeper there then. Can you go into that?
Yes. One of my favorite scholars is Jürgen Moltmann, and as a seminarian, you're going to come across him at some point. And he's written a book called The Crucified God. And he talks about the God-forsakenness of Christ. When you study the atonement theories, and we kind of think about the cross is the satisfaction, Christ satisfying the wrath of God, and God accepting the sacrifice. It's almost contractual. There's no emotion. And this idea of God's immutability, and therefore God is unable to suffer. To be vulnerable to suffering means that you're vulnerable to death, ultimately. That's the reasoning. So for a long time, people have taught that the cross was a suffering of Christ, but it wasn't the suffering of God.
Oh, okay.
Moltmann says that with the cross, what we see is not just a suffering Christ, because indeed, if it's going to be real, what we see is the suffering of God.
Wow.
So the crucifixion tells us something about God, and that one, it tells us something about the depth of human depravity, but it tells us also the depth of God's love.
Yeah.
And so in the crucifixion, it tells us much about what God is like. Because when we think about the fact that Jesus suffered, but also as Moltmann says, that if the cross does not include the suffering of God, then how can it reveal the depth of God's love? Because without suffering, you cannot really understand love. And so what I wanted to share is the fact that by looking closely at the cross and the significance of the death of Christ, not just for us, but what it meant for God. And also the fact that not just Christ's suffering, but we also see the suffering of God. That tells us that suffering is a very important part of the human condition. And what we see is the solidarity of God in all human suffering. And so, as one scholar said, the cross is the test, I think it was Bonhoeffer, of everything that is Christian. And so what I want to do is, what I hope we're going to get across is by focusing a little bit more, and the cross is so sanitized. Everybody, we got this, Easter Friday, we have all these plays. But I think sometimes it's a run-up to Easter Sunday.
Right.
It's a before act. But what we want to do is begin to see that Easter Friday is the high point. The resurrection is the corollary, it's the outworking of what happened on the cross. Everything was completed on the cross. And I think sometimes we miss the power of the resurrection.
Right.
Because and what it tells us about God, suffering, solidarity. And the cross is God having solidarity with all human people who are suffering. And that tells us something about the power of the resurrection. So I'm kind of feeling for that.
Wow, okay. When you really break it down like that, I can see, including myself sometimes, we do miss all of that, the suffering of God, because we do make this rush to the resurrection. So I'm glad that we're tackling this in the theme this year.
Amen. Good.
And so with the cross now being exposed, of course, we're not going to forget about the resurrection, I know. And that now with the resurrection being revealed is also part of the theme. So what is the deeper significance of that, now looking at the cross being exposed?
Well, good question. I think the cross and the resurrection is not just a divine story, but it's a human story. It has to mean something for the human condition. And suffering, pain, and even if we're well off and everything else, we all face some kind of trauma, suffering, and ultimately we're going to face death.
Yeah.
What we see in the power of the cross, first of all, is the nature of God's love and the extent to which God's love would go to even suffer. And the idea of the suffering of God is quite controversial theologically. But I like the idea that in some way, the death of Christ crying out on the cross, my God, why have you forsaken me, tells us something about the relationship with God. Because it's only there when we see the division, sin comes in between the eternal unity almost between God and Christ, existing in eternal unity and what Augustine calls the bond of love. And then what we see is Christ crying out to God. And as Moltmann calls it, in the cross is the God-forsakenness of Christ. And that's a strong term to use.
Right.
But so when we think about what that is, not just for life, but for the human condition of greed and pride, and even right now we're facing wars across the world, there is hope. And I think ultimately the resurrection is a story that tells us, it's a narrative that tells us that there is hope. And the hope is not just premised upon Christ rising from the dead, but it's premised upon the fact that Christ rose from the dead because of the love of God. And this idea of, one, the crucifixion, and I keep going back to the crucifixion because that's where my mind is. It's so controversial because in many religions, this idea, particularly Islam and many other religions, that a God can be disfigured, a God can be defeated almost on the cross, suffering, bleeding, and dying. It's so antithetical to a lot of religion. Because gods are all powerful. Zeus, Apollos, you name all the gods, they're always powerful.
Right.
But in this, we see a suffering God. And I think that the power of the resurrection is the power that tells us that there is hope beyond suffering, beyond pain, beyond the human condition of ultimate death. The resurrection tells us that there is hope, and that's why I love another book by Moltmann, which is called The Theology of Hope. We cannot understand hope just by looking at the resurrection. We have to understand hope by looking at the cross. And so I'm hoping that this will be by an experience, by focusing on and getting closer, removing the filters, the sanitized cross that James Cone talks about, that the cross must be historically and socially revealed and not sanitized, right? Those two things are so important. I'm hoping that people will then see that if Christ can die and be sort of buried and can rise again, we can also do the same in our lives, our families, in our struggles. There is hope. So the hope is premised upon the power of the love of God and the sacrifice of Christ.
Wow, there's a lot right there. And it's important that we reflect on these things. And sometimes in the Christian faith, we take these things for granted, right? The cross, the resurrection. So it's nice to look at this theme for Easter, right? And for you to break it down for us and to give us a better understanding just how amazing it really is versus just kind of seeing it on the surface. So thank you for that.
Sure, good.
So Pastor Clark, now that we've taken a look at the theme and gone a little bit deeper, when it comes to inviting people, what would you say to them to invite them to the service with this theme in mind?
So I'm hoping that to some extent they're going to be shocked.
Okay. Mm-hmm.
I'm hoping that they come to church on Easter Friday. I want the power of the cross to really be impactful. First of all, to talk about the depth of human depravity and the significance and the sort of the death blow of sin to the world. And also to understand, because you can really understand you can only understand the power of the cross if you understand the depth of human sin. And so I'm hoping that, first of all, they will encounter the cross unfiltered, that we will talk about the depth of human condition and why God had to go to such extremes. Right? This is going to extreme, right? The incarnation and the crucifixion. So I'm hoping that they will have a fresh encounter with the cross, in order so that they can have a fresh encounter with the significance of the resurrection. So I'm hoping that they will come away feeling that, one, they've encountered the cross in a new way, and that will bring about some introspection of the significance of the resurrection hope. So that's what I'm hoping that we can achieve.
Okay, wow. Well, with this in mind and the execution that we're planning, I can totally see people coming and experiencing the cross and the resurrection in a brand new way. So I'm excited. Okay.
And if you need any more content, just let me know.
All right. So, thank you so much, Pastor, for sharing us. Now we have plenty of content, right, Camille? So I think we're ready to share it to the world.
Okay.